Who do you think is the best operator in R6? Is it Azami? Is it Iana? Well, I think I know the answer. Throughout the past couple of months, I've been polling you, my audience, and asking you to tier list every operator in the game. And today I'll be showing you the results. Will your favorite operator get a good ranking? Well, make sure you watch all the way through to find out. Now, the first operator I had you guys vote on was Smoke, which 69% of you said was S tier. So he's going to be going right there in S tier, and I 100% agree with you guys. He has a deployable shield, an amazing gadget, and he has the shotgun SMG-11, which allows him to just dominate in pretty much any close range gunfight. The next operator I had you guys vote on was Mute, which 50% of you said was A tier, and 41% of you said was S tier. And so just for that, I'm going to be putting him at the top of A tier. I can see this ranking, but me personally, I think he's S because he has the same great loadout that Smoke has, but on top of that, he brings his mute jammers, which counter pretty much every drone operator in the game, and there's a lot of people picking drone operators nowadays. And also, he gets a nitro cell, which is extremely strong for denying the plan. The next operator I had you guys vote on was Sledge, which 58% of you said was A tier. So I'm going to be putting him right below Mute. I think this ranking is overall justified. He used to be S tier before he became a 3 armor, but now that he's a 3 armor and he doesn't have the SMG-11 anymore, it does knock him down some points. Now, the next operator is Thatcher, which 49% of you said was S tier. So I'm going to be putting him in S tier right behind Smoke. Thatcher is a clear S tier just for the fact that he can counter every operator in the game, and that will never change. Thatcher will pretty much always be S tier. Following that up, we have Ashe, which 52% of you said was B tier, and I think that's totally warranted. The only thing that Ashe really has going for her right now is her loadout, because she only brings 2 breaching rounds, which Zofia outclasses since she brings stuns on top of it, and also other operators with nades can just do her job but better. So the only thing that you're really picking Ashe for is the G3 with the 1.5, which Iana also has. So there's no real reason to pick Ashe right now in the current meta. Following up Ashe, we have Thermite, which 63% of you said was A tier. So I'm going to be putting him above Sledge. Thermite is totally worthy of the A tier. He is really good on very specific bomb sites where there's outside walls, but for walls on the inside of the map, Ace just outclasses him in pretty much every way. Following up Thermite, we have IQ, which 58% of you said was B tier. I think you guys give IQ a little bit too high of a rating. I personally think that IQ is C tier for a couple of reasons. One, her gadget is just really not that useful. She only counters electronic gadgets, which are used a decent amount of time, but her gadget just isn't worth running over someone like a Thatcher, a Twitch, a Brava, a Flores. There's so many other operators that can do what IQ does, but they have way more versatility. And the only thing that IQ really has going for her is the 3 speed with a good gun. But overall, I don't think it's worth picking IQ over a lot of the other operators that are in the meta right now. So that's why I would personally put her in the C tier. Following up IQ, we have Blitz, which 45% of you said was C tier, and 33% of you said was B tier. So I think he's going to go in the top of C, and I think that's totally fine. Blitz does have his niche use cases and certain strategies, and he can be a decent roam clear operator, but with him being so easily countered by impacts, he definitely can't go into like the B tier in my opinion. Following up Blitz, we have Jager, which this was really surprising to me. 56% of you said he was A tier, and only 30% of you said he was S tier. And I honestly 100% agree with you. I think Jager over the past couple of seasons has gotten a lot worse due to his gun constantly being nerfed and his gadget being a shadow of its former self. He's still worth running, and he's still not a bad operator. I just don't think he's as good as he used to be. Following up Jager, we have Bandit, which 59% of you said was A tier, and 24% of you said was B tier. So I'm going to be putting him at the bottom of A. Bandit is a decent breach denial operator, but compared to operators like Kaid and even Mute, he just isn't as versatile in my opinion. So there's very niche use cases where I'd actually pick a Bandit over like a Kaid. So the only time Bandit really comes into play is when Kaid's banned. Following up Bandit, we have Pulse, which 60% of you said was B tier, and 24% of you said he was A tier. So I'll be putting him in the middle of B. Pulse is a very strong operator for plant denial on maps where there is a lot of vertical play, but because not every map has a lot of vertical play, you aren't guaranteed use out of him in every single map, which is why I think he's only worthy of B tier. Following up Pulse, we have Castle, which 52% of you said was B tier, and only 30% of you said was A tier. I honestly think you guys are sleeping on Castle quite a lot, because for me personally, I definitely think Castle's A tier. He brings a secondary shotgun, which is incredibly strong because he can set up the site. He also brings 4 castle barricades that are now quicker to place than before. And he also has the 1.5 on the UMP, which the UMP may not be an amazing gun, but it having a 1.5 makes it a lot better. All of that on top of his bulletproof camera just makes him an absolute utility machine, and I love using him on most of my site setups. Following up castle, we have Kapkan, which 56% of you said was A tier, while 24% of you said he was S tier. So I think Kapkan's worthy of the top of A tier ranking. And honestly, I wholeheartedly agree with you guys. He is by far the best trap operator in the game right now. Even after losing the 1.5, his gun is a menace. He gets 5 of his EDDs, which can deal a ton of damage to the attackers if they aren't paying attention. And he also gets a nitro cell and impact grenades. He literally has one of the best loadouts in the game, in my opinion, and his traps just so happen to be the best as well. Following up Kapkan, we have Tachanka, which is by far the most spread votes we've had in this entire video. 47% of you said he was C tier, but 15% of you said he was S, B, and F tier pretty much. So I'm just going to be putting him in the middle of C tier because I think it pretty much balances itself out. And for me personally, I can definitely see Tachanka being the middle of C tier. With the recent buffs to a Shamika launcher, it is a little bit stronger because you can get more out of him. In theory, he has the ability to burn way more time than any other operator in the game, but I think where Tachanka fails is in his loadout and in the fact that his gadget is a launcher. On defense, it's really hard to be able to pull out a launcher and deploy it without getting swung and an attacker killing you before you can switch back to your gun. And with Tachanka, with how slow his launcher is, it really does hurt him on this tier list. Following up Tachanka, we have Fuze, which 54% of you said he was B tier. And I'm totally fine with this ranking. He is a really strong vertical play operator on certain maps like Chalet, for example, and he has a lot of very cool niche use cases. And also his AK-12 is just a menace. It is one of the best guns in the game right now, even after all of its nerfs. And so for me personally, I'm totally fine with B tier. Next up after Fuze, we have Glaz, which 46% of you said he was C tier and 34% of you said he was B tier. And so with him being so close to B, I think he's going to be at the top of C. For me personally, I agree with the people who voted Glaz B tier. He brings nades, a Gon 6, a secondary SMG if you want to bring that. His DMR is extremely strong. It's by far the best DMR in this game, in my opinion. And his ability to see through smokes has gotten a lot better recently. And you can get away with running him in a lot of lineups and strategies. And for me personally, he's one of my favorite operators right now. Following up Glaz, we have Twitch, which 53% of you said was B tier and 29% of you said A tier. Twitch is honestly worthy of B tier like you guys voted her right now, in my opinion. With the recent nerfs to her F2, she just really isn't competitive when it comes to her loadout. And I just personally think that you should just be running Flores in 90% of situations over Twitch. Following up Twitch, we have Montagne, which 48% of you said was B tier and 27% of you said was C tier. And so I'll be putting him at the bottom of B tier. And me personally, that's totally fine. Montagne does have his maps where he can be very strong, like Coastline and Bank, but there are also a lot of maps that he just sucks on. So with his uses being so niche, you can't really get away with putting him in like the A tier or S tier in my eyes. Following up Montagne, we have Rook, which 45% of you voted in B tier and 33% of you voted in A tier. I'm surprised you guys voted him this high, but I'm totally okay with this. Rook has become a lot better over the past couple of seasons with the implementation of his ability to revive all of his teammates with his Rook armor, and also with the recent body shot meta becoming so strong with, you know, extended barrel and all that. A lot more people are going to get use out of Rook armor than they once were. I've personally had Rook armor affect a lot of my ranked games when the enemies run it, and so I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. Also, him having a 2x on his MP5 with impact grenades makes him have some real lethality. Now it is time to rank Rook's big brother, Doc, which 49% of you said was A tier and 32% of you said was B tier. So I'll be putting him towards the bottom of A tier, and I think that's totally justified. Doc has a 1.5 on his MP5, which is incredibly strong. Having any sort of magnification side on defense automatically gives you some good points. His stims have gotten a lot better with the ability for them to heal you 200 HP no matter what, so you can revive someone to full HP. And on top of it all, he brings barbed wire and a bailiff, which allows him to set up the bomb site and be a pretty strong utility operator. Now, next up is a placement that I think is going to be very controversial, and I personally disagree with it, which is Frost, which 51% of you said was A tier, and 32% of you said was B tier. I personally think this is unjustified. I think Frost is worthy of S tier easily. She has a deployable shield, a 1.5 on her SMG, a secondary shotgun, and her traps are the second best traps in the game in my eyes. So there really isn't anything wrong with Frost. She just gives you so much utility across the board. When the Frost rework comes out, that may sway my opinion, but right now she's definitely worthy of S tier. Following up Frost, we have Buck, which is by far one of the most dominant rankings in this entire video. 62% of you said he was A tier, and that is totally fine by me. I think Buck is by far one of the best vertical play operators in this game, no questions asked. He brings flashbangs, a Gon 6, and he has a really good primary in the form of the C8. And on top of it, he's a 2 armor, which makes him slightly better than Sledge in that category as well. So I think A tier is just fine. Following up Buck, we have Valkyrie, which a whopping 58% of you said was S tier, and I'm not surprised by this ranking at all. Valk is one of the best defenders in the game right now, and she always has been. The ability to give your team extra cameras is just undoubtedly incredibly strong. Now, Blackbeard, on the other hand, is the complete opposite, with 54% of you saying he's F tier, and that's totally warranted. Blackbeard's shields are just very niche, and most of the time you just end up dying trying to use them. After Blackbeard, we have Caveira, which is another very low ranking operator in this video, with 45% of you saying she's C tier and 28% of you saying she's B tier. So I'm going to be putting Caveira at the middle of C tier, and I think that's totally fine. Caveira does have her niche use cases, funny enough, and in Pro League she's been getting a lot more use recently than I ever thought she would be, but she's still the worst roamer in the game by far. Vigil, Solace, and even other operators like Jager and Bandit are worth running over Caveira for the roam role. Now, next up is another placement that I completely disagree with, which is 51% of you saying that Capitao belongs in the B tier. I think Capitao is one of the best operators in this game by far. He brings 2 smoke bolts, 2 fire bolts, 2 incredibly strong primary weapons, and he brings a Gon 6 and hard breaching charges. He literally has no hole in his loadout at all. And it just so happens that his guns are 2 of the best guns in this game statistically. So I don't know why you guys voted him into B tier, but me personally, I just disagree with it. Next up after Capitao is Hibanna, with 62% of you saying she's A tier, which I was kind of surprised by. I was expecting a lot more of you guys to vote her S tier, but only 18% of you did. But this is totally fine. I actually agree with Hibanna being A tier. Her gadget is only really useful on maps with lots of hatches, and if you're not going for hatches, trying to get a wall open with Hibanna is pretty abysmal. But she does bring a great loadout with 2 amazing guns, especially now with the compensator buff, making them a lot easier to control, and she brings flashbangs, so there really isn't much to complain about with Hibanna. Next up is the operator that released alongside Hibanna, which is Echo, with 48% of you saying that he's A tier and 39% of you saying he's B tier. So I'm going to be putting him towards the bottom of A tier, and I think this is totally warranted. I'm actually surprised that you guys voted him this high, but I actually agree with this wholeheartedly. Echo has been getting really slept on recently. If you use him correctly, you can get a massive amount of utility out of his drones, and his weapons are super slept on. His Supernova shotgun has stupid range and damage. He has the Bearing 9 as his secondary, which is a great machine pistol, and he also gets the MP5 SD, which is basically just a suppressed MP5 with a magnification sight, which feels so good to use. And his deployable shield gives him even more points. So I definitely think he's worthy of an A tier ranking. After Echo, we have one of the most banned operators in this game, Jackal, with 23% of you saying he's S tier and 53% of you saying he's A tier. So I'm going to be putting him at the top of A. And I think this is fine. I think a lot of people overrate Jackal, personally. I think Jackal's gadget is a lot worse than a lot of people make it out to be, because when he scans your footprints, he basically reveals his own position as well. And the reason that is because every time he scans your footprints, you get to see how far away he is from you. And this just makes Jackal a lot more niche than someone like Lion or Dokkaebi. And so for me personally, I don't even think he's A tier, but A tier is fine. I don't really care. Next up is Mira, which is undoubtedly S tier, with 53% of you saying she's S, and it's totally deserved. Mira's ability to make a bomb site strong is stupid. She can turn a really bad bomb site into an amazing one with the right setup. Next up, we have Lesion, with 61% of you saying he's A tier, and I think this is totally warranted. Lesion is a very slept on operator right now, especially for solo queue, because his traps can give you a ton of info, and he also brings a really good gun in the form of the T5. Next up, we have the other operator that released alongside Lesion, which is Ying, with 53% of you saying she's A tier, and this is another placement I'm fine with. I honestly would have put Ying S tier, because I think her gadget is one of the strongest gadgets in the game for taking map control, but I can definitely see the argument for putting her A, because her guns really aren't the best, and her secondary gadgets really aren't the best. She only really brings smoke grenades. Next up, we have Zofia, which surprisingly 47% of you voted her B tier, and only 38% of you voted her A, which I guess I'm fine with. Her being in the same tier as Ashe is kind of crazy to me. I think Zofia just outclasses Ashe in every way, so I probably would have put her up here in A, somewhere in the lower A ranking, but this is totally fine. Zofia has really good guns, and she has a really strong gadget. It's just her speed really hurts her. Her being a 3 armor now is kind of annoying. Now for the other operator that released alongside Zofia, we have Ella, which 60% of you said was B tier, and this is totally fine. Ella's gadget is just really not that great compared to other operators defenders like Lesion and stuff. The only thing that she has going for her is her good gun and deployable shield. After Ella, we have Dokkaebi, which 50% of you said she was A tier. And I guess I can see this. Me personally, I think Dokkaebi is S tier just because of the sheer amount of utility she brings. She brings a Gone 6, she can bring flashbangs or EMPs, she can hack defender cameras, she can call the defenders and reveal their locations, and when she's calling them, dead defenders can't even look at their cameras at all. So this is an extremely powerful global ability. But the one downside, and I'm assuming that's why a lot of you put her in A tier, is that she doesn't have any strong primary weapon. She only has a DMR or a Boss G, which obviously the DMR is the better pick out of those two, but she still doesn't have a automatic primary. Following up Dokkaebi, we have Vigil, which 54% of you said was B tier. And I think Vigil is one of the most overrated defenders in this game right now. Vigil's gadget is just simply outclassed by Solace because all Vigil does is hide from drones, whereas Solace, she completely outright destroys them because she can see where the drones are and then hunt them down and shoot them. Whereas Vigil, all he does is he hides from the drones and he doesn't even get the info on where the drones are. So for me personally, if you're going to pick someone to roam with, Solace is by far better. Following up Vigil, we have Finka, which 54% of you said was B tier. And I think this is totally fine. Finka, after the LMG nerf, just hasn't been the same. Her gadget is decent, but her guns are just outright awful. Her spear has a lot of recoil compared to other guns on the R6 roster, and her LMG's recoil is just off the charts. And so for me personally, I rarely find myself having a use for a Finka. Next up, we have the other operator that released an Operation Caveira, which is Lion, with 54% of you saying he's A tier. And I think he's worthy of the A tier. He brings the Gone 6, he brings flashbangs or EMPs, which most of the time you're going to want to bring flashbangs, but if you need to get a wall open, EMPs are good as well. And his E1D is a really strong gadget because it allows you to deal with very aggressive defenders. Next up, we have Alibi with 55% of you saying she's A tier. And if this was just a couple of seasons ago when she had the 1.5, I'm sure she'd undoubtedly be S. But because she doesn't have the 1.5 anymore, it makes picking her a lot more questionable because her gun, while it's strong, it doesn't have a 1.5 anymore. And all she really brings is a shield and a shotgun because her gadget just kind of sucks. Following Alibi, we have Maestro with 56% of you saying he's B tier. And I definitely disagree with this ranking. A lot of people don't like picking Maestro because Brava exists, but I'll be honest, throughout my entire time playing Maestro this season, I've never had my Maestro cams hacked. You can easily deal with a Brava trying to hack your cameras by either A, shooting them with your evil eye itself, or by just paying attention and shooting the Brava drone when it gets into the bomb site. If your team is communicating at all, you can pretty much shut this down entirely. As long as you're not setting up your Maestro cams in some random off-site location, you'll still get a ton of utility out of them. And with his Alda LMG being one of the best defender weapons statistically, I really think he's deserving of the A tier. Next up, we have Maverick, which 48% of you voted him A tier and 35% of you put him B tier. And I can definitely see that. His ability to make murder holes is definitely his strongest use case right now, because actually opening a wall with him without frag grenades is really annoying. And also another thing that goes well for him is that he has one of the strongest guns in the game on attack. So I can definitely see why people have put him A tier, but me personally, I probably would have put him in the top of B, but this ranking is fine. Next up, we have Clash, which was another really spread ranking, which is kind of funny to me. 45% of you put her in C tier, 21% of you put her in B tier, and 24% of you put her in F tier. So I'm just going to put her right dab in the middle of C. And I think this is kind of all right. Clash is very strong with the right team and the right lineup on the right bomb site, but it's very rare for all three of those things to come together. And so it makes her a very niche operator that a lot of people don't understand how to play, which is why she gets a lot of bad rep. But me personally, I think she's fine in C just because of how niche she is. Following up Clash, we have Kaid, which was one of the closest rankings we've had in this entire video. 47% of you voted him S tier and 44% of you voted him A tier. And I think either one of those rankings would have been perfectly fine. Kaid being the top of A or in S is totally fine. He brings a nitro cell, a good gun, and his gadget is by far the best anti-breach in the game. Next up, we have Nomad, which released alongside Kaid, with 60% of you saying she's A tier. And I'm kind of fine with this. She is a really strong flank watch operator, especially if you have a team that can mesh well around it. And she also brings flashbangs and a good gun, so there really isn't anything to complain about here. Following up Nomad, we have Gridlock, which 57% of you said was B tier, and 21% of you said was A tier. I'm kind of against this ranking. Me personally, I think Gridlock is better than Nomad, simply for the fact that Gridlock brings a Gone 6 and EMPs, which is way more versatility than someone like Nomad brings, because all she brings is flashbangs. And on top of that, Gridlock can cover 4 flanks while Nomad can only hold 3. So in theory, you can get a lot more utility out of Gridlock, but the one downside of her is that she's a 3 armor on attack. So I can see docking her a few points for that, but I still think she's worthy of A tier at least. Next up, we have Mozzie, which 65% of you voted him A tier. And I personally disagree with this a lot. Mozzie's gadget just isn't that good compared to someone like Mute, and he doesn't bring a lot of utility compared to a lot of other operators on defense. And compared to other roamers in the game, he really isn't worth running to roam with either. The only time I find myself getting utility out of Mozzie is when the attackers bring a Twitch or a Brava. And even then, that rarely happens, because if a Brava accidentally goes into a Mozzie pest, they've kind of made a huge mistake, and that'll rarely happen in a coordinated team. And Mozzie's guns just really aren't that good compared to what they used to be. The P10 Roni is pretty bad considering it only has 15 bullets in a magazine, and the Commando is all right, but it isn't anything crazy to write home about. So to me personally, I would have put Mozzie in B tier, but that's just me. Next up, we have Warden, who has been getting a lot more use recently in both Pro League and Ranked, and 52% of you said he was B tier. And compared to just a couple seasons ago, this is incredibly high for Warden. Warden used to be considered to be one of the worst operators in the game, but since Pro League players have been using him a lot more and people are starting to realize how strong he is since flashbangs have become so stupid, he has been getting a lot more pick rate. And with his deployable shield and 1.5 on the MPX, he's definitely worthy of at least B tier, if not A. Next up, we have Nook, which is another placement I just completely disagree with. 49% of you put her in A tier, and 30% of you put her in B tier. For me personally, I think Nook is definitely S tier, but obviously you guys disagree with that. Me personally, I think with the FMG9 1.5, it's a pretty decent weapon for attack, and her ability is just one of the strongest in the game. Being able to hide from information gathering gadgets like Maestro, Evil Eyes, Valkyrie cameras, and all those kind of things allows you to sneak up on a bomb site and have the defenders just be completely unaware of your positioning. This can get you at least 1 free kill if you play it right, and with her nades, you can get even more additional kills that the defenders will probably not expect. With her ability to sneak around the map and catch defenders off guard, I personally think she's S tier because the defenders have to constantly worry about it. Next up, we have Goyo, which 51% of you voted in B tier, and 33% of you voted in A tier. And I think this ranking is kind of all right. Me personally, I think Goyo's like middle of A, but putting in bottom of B isn't that big of a deal either. He has the Vector with the 1.5, he brings a Nitro Cell, and his gadget is a really strong entry denial gadget. It allows you to burn so much time compared to other operators because of how long each canister lasts, but the one downside is that you have to place them preemptively in the round, so where you place them, the attackers may not even come from. Next up, we have Amaru, which 54% of you put her in B tier, and I think this is personally too high because Amaru is a very niche operator. You have to pick her on maps where there's a lot of windows, and even when you pick her on a map with a lot of windows, you most likely will not get utility out of her because you'll just end up going through a window and then the defender will just instantly shoot you. Next up is Callie, which 45% of you put her in C tier and 34% of you put her in B tier. I think this is totally fine. Putting Callie in the top of C tier is definitely warranted. Her gadgets are simply outclassed by other operators like Flores. I would argue even Zofia and Ashe outclass Callie, and that is for a couple of reasons. One, Callie doesn't have a primary weapon that's automatic, and B, Callie outside of her gadget doesn't bring you much utility. So for me personally, I find myself rarely using Callie in most situations. Next up, we have Wamai, which 51% of you voted him A tier. Me personally, I think Wamai is worthy of S tier now because of his addition of the 1.5 on the MP5K, but him being an A is totally fine. But Wamai's ability to deny projectiles is incredibly strong. That's why Jager is also one of the best operators in the game right now. But he also brings additional utility in the form of impact grenades, and he also brings an incredibly good loadout with the AUG and MP5K as primary op. So Wamai is definitely one of the best operators in the game right now, hands down. Following up Wamai, we have Iana, which 62% of you voted her S tier, and I don't think anyone's surprised by this. Next up, after Iana, we have Oryx, which a lot of people have been picking her recently, and 48% of you voted him A tier, and 31% of you voted him B tier. I definitely think Oryx is worthy of A tier right now. Oryx's ability to roam is hands down one of the best in the game. He can traverse up hatches, which can catch attacker drone work off guard, and his T5 SMG gives him one of the best guns out of any of the roamers. Him losing the 1.5 on it does hurt a little bit, which is why I think he's A and not S, but him bringing a secondary shotgun and the T5 and being able to just traverse up hatches at any point during the round makes him a really hard roamer to deal with. Next up we have Ace, which 65% of you voted him S tier, and I think we all know why. He's by far the most versatile hard breacher in this game because he brings a really good gun, and his gadget allows you to open walls from range. Following up Ace, we have Melusi, which 56% of you voted her B tier, and 31% of you voted her A tier. And I think this is totally fine. Her MP5 just really can't hold up compared to other operators right now, and since she's a 3 armor with no magnification sight on her guns at all, it hurts her a lot. Her gadget just simply can't carry her hard enough. Next up we have Zero, which 55% of you voted him A tier, and I'm happy to see he's been getting a lot more love recently from Ubisoft. The recent rework to his gadget where it won't automatically drill through walls has made him a lot more fun to use, and also them making him a 3-speed makes him even more fun to play. And he has one of the best guns in the game in the form of the SC3000. Following that up, we have Aruni, which 61% of you voted her A tier, and I'm totally fine by this. She's another projectile denying operator that also can deny entry depending on how you play her. And her DMR isn't an automatic weapon, but since it has a 1.5, it can actually be really strong on defense. Next up, we have Flores, which 51% of you voted him A tier, and 33% of you voted him B tier. I actually personally would vote Flores A tier right now because of how much he can simply do. He has the ability to destroy a minimum of 4 hard pieces of utility from the defenders, and he can breach soft surfaces, and he brings flashbangs to burn ADSs, and he brings a good gun. He just covers so much on the attacking side right now that I do think he's worthy of S. Following up Flores, we have a little bit of a hot topic operator in the form of Thunderbird. 34% of you voted her A tier, and 49% of you voted her B tier. She is by far one of the most controversial operators in this game. A lot of people think she's really strong, and a lot of people think she sucks. And for me personally, I'm one of the people that thinks Thunderbird sucks as an operator. Her gun is decent in the form of the spear, and she also brings a nitro cell, but I just don't think her gadget's worth running over someone like Doc. She's just simply outclassed by him in every way, in my opinion. And the only thing that she has going for her is that her gadget's stationary, so if she dies, your teammates can still get utility out of it, but I just don't think that trade-off is worth it. Next up, we have Osa, which 61% of you voted her A tier, and once again, I'm totally fine with this. She's been getting a lot more use recently due to people realizing how strong her shields are, and her guns are just up there as one of the best. And the addition of EMP impacts has helped her a lot. Next up, we have Thorn, which got voted into B tier, and I don't think a lot of you are going to be surprised by this. She has the worst gadget out of any of the trap operators in this game, but what makes up for it is her deployable shield and great loadout. Next up, we have Azami, which 72% of you voted her S tier, and I don't think anyone is surprised by this, and you could argue that she's the best defender in the game right now. Next up, we have Sins, which 51% of you voted them C tier, and I think we all know why. Their gadget just doesn't bring enough to the table, and their loadout just doesn't make up for it either. The only thing they have going for them is their 3-speed rating. Next up, we have Grim, which is F tier, and you could argue that he deserves to be in a tier all on his own for how bad he is, and I'm not even going to go into it because it's been beaten to death by multiple other YouTubers. And for the final operator of year 7, we have Solace, which 30% of you said she was S tier, and 54% of you said she was A tier. And for me personally, I think Solace is wholeheartedly S tier. Her ability to counter drone work is just unmatched, and she also gets impacts with the P90 and SMG11. She has an amazing loadout, and her being able to just see what the attackers are doing at all times with pretty much no punishment is definitely very strong. And finally, we have Brava, which 55% of you voted her A tier, so she'd end up right here in between Thermite and Ying probably. And I personally think that's a little bit overrated because I've gone into this multiple times in other videos. I think Brava's drones is by far the worst in the game compared to like Flores and Twitch. She has the worst drones, and the only thing that Brava has going for her is that she has a really strong gun and that she has a really good speed rating, but outside of that, you're rarely going to get utility out of Brava. And so for me personally, I'd rather just bring like a Twitch or a Flores. So this is the final tier list. Did your favorite operator get placed in a spot you're happy with, or do you think they were unjustly placed? Let me know in the comments down below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did and you want to be part of future videos like this, make sure to subscribe because I post polls like this all the time on my community tab, and I'm sure you won't want to miss them. If you want to watch another video just like this one, a video will be popping up on your screen right now where I rank every map in R6 based on your votes. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.